Hey guys, it's Ryan with Fluid Health, bringing you another episode of Science Powered Fitness, and today we're talking about different types of forces in the body. One's called a linear force production, one's called an axillary force production. So what are those guys? Well, linear force has to do typically with the center of mass of the body. So it's where the majority of the mass is centered, and center of mass, and that's normally at the sacral base. So right around here in your midsection of your pelvis is where your body's center of gravity is. So it's that pivot point where everything balances. It's about 57% of the height of your body from the floor, and we move the center of mass by engaging our inner unit muscles that stabilize the spine, and then we use these global movement patterns or power muscle groups with the external core, or what's called outer unit, to move the trunk around. And that trunk and hip position, by way of the engagement of these muscle systems, can shift our weight, and that can then lead to instability. And that can actually ask our limbs to overreact. So when we have a linear weight shift, it can create an inertial response, which means you're moving from one segment and dragging another, or moving another segment with it. That actually displaces the joint structure below it or above it, and the body has to react to that and then compensate for it with the limbs. So we're talking about this in reference to bunions on the feet. And why does that happen? Well, again, the idea is that if the foot's not strong enough to absorb force, it dumps in. I can kind of show you that with my foot. It'll dump in and flatten. And so oftentimes all that pressure goes right down to that bone structure here at the first metatarsal phalange joint, and it puts a lot of pressure on the bone, creating an ossification or a bone mineral density. And so a lot of times what people will do is they'll try to get orthotics or arch supports or anything that locally keeps that foot more stable, so that they can address what's called the axillary force. So if I pull my toes back in, it's going to rotate and pivot. It's going to go into abduction. It's more of an axillary force. Whereas a linear force is like a shear, where the weight is shifted. So one is pivoting around a joint structure like that, and one's just being pushed. So when we have a linear weight shift from our center of gravity acting on the joint, it means that the joint doesn't have to bend or locally axially rotate. So I can axially rotate my knee joint, right? Or I can shift my center of mass from my hip forward like this, and I can make my knee move forward by way of my hip displacement. So my hip can move forward and force the knee into flexion. Now again, if that center of gravity or that linear weight distribution is out of balance, well then the limb has to absorb that, and that can dissociate the joint structure from its neutral position. That can create issues with tracking and recruitment, and that eventually can lead to some injuries. So again, we want to know the difference between linear and axillary, and what's acting on the system from a feed forward system with the weight acting on the structure, or a feedback, how the joint structure responds to it, and then the environment, and how are we preparing the body to control both systems. So a little bit of information today to think about. Think about axillary and linear when you're thinking about your movement quality. Questions on it, reach out to us at admin@fluidhealthandfitness.com. And remember, your body's designed to move, so stay in motion.